Hello everyone, thank you for being here. Yesterday, I uploaded a video about the U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen's upcoming trip to Brazil to participate in a G20 finance ministers meetings. I discussed that the number one task on her agenda there is to quote-unquote encourage other nations to voice concerns over China's manufacturing capabilities. Of course, there is very little doubt that Janet Yellen's trip will likely be a disappointing one again, but I did notice that many of your comments were about manufacturing in the United States and the new protectionist measures, new tariffs that are used as a political tool rather than a way to help American economy, to help an average American. Because if you truly wanted to help the U.S. economy, you would likely start with investing in your own people, with investing in your domestic infrastructure, but that is not what we saw. It is not a secret that China is the global leader in manufacturing due to years of consistent investments in renewable sources of energy, due to its access to a vast labor market, lower input costs, as well as other equally important factors that I discussed previously in my videos. The United States simply cannot outcompete China right now, especially in those absolutely critical areas such as semiconductors and other key industrial goods. The United States, and by the U.S. I mean, of course, its political leadership, for decades has failed to recognize the importance of investing in three key areas: in manufacturing, in infrastructure, and the third one is innovation. We are sending billions overseas, literally to wage wars year after year. Our senators, some of them were even presidential hopefuls, and I'm sure you know who I'm talking about here, go as far as to personally sign bombs with a personalized message before those bombs are shipped overseas. Instead of serving the interests of their direct constituents, instead of focusing on those three areas that I just mentioned a minute ago, on innovation, on manufacturing, and on American infrastructure, those three areas would have lifted millions of Americans out of poverty. And it would have made all of us so much better off. So in this video, I will walk you through a quick overview of the main reasons that actually led to the United States manufacturing decline. Those who think that the U.S. can just regain that power back easily are not being honest. Given the economic decline, the political crisis, social crisis, the U.S. will have to continue relying on foreign manufacturers for its essential goods. And yes, of course, that is a concern in the context of national security, but the current industrial policy and those who support it is to blame here. You don't have to blame other countries. We have to look inward for the reasons that caused the decline in our economy as well as in our manufacturing. So first and foremost, decades ago, corporations decided to outsource manufacturing production overseas, primarily to Mexico, to Taiwan, to Malaysia, and to China. On the one hand, offshoring created new jobs overseas, and it helped support emerging markets, which is a very, very good thing. But on the other hand, it limited investments in domestic infrastructure. Decades of outsourcing led to a near collapse of many manufacturing industries in the United States. For example, since 2000, the United States lost more than a quarter of all manufacturing jobs. That is a decline of nearly 5 million jobs, which led to a considerable deterioration in the quality of life for those working families, as well as to an expansion in the number of low-income earners and a widening gap between the poor and upper middle class and those who we would call high-income earners. Outsourcing jobs deprived individuals without a college degree of a variety of economic opportunities, by the way. And this is something that hasn't really impacted just one generation of American workers. It had a profound impact on their future generations, on their children and their grandchildren, as they now live paycheck to paycheck. So when we talk about the complete and utter decline in the United States manufacturing power, we have to acknowledge that it led to a decline in the well-being of its population. As big corporations ramped up their efforts to offshore manufacturing with the goal to increase corporate profits and simultaneously to decrease costs to produce those goods, they had fewer and fewer incentives to invest in American workers and to innovate. CEOs have been enjoying larger and larger bonuses. The offshoring strategy worked for them, but ultimately it led to a drop in business investments in domestic manufacturing supply chains. So very often we hear about semiconductors. Semiconductors have been manufactured overseas in recent years, and there's really not much the US can do if the supply chain with factories in Malaysia and Taiwan somehow breaks. So we're greatly dependent on those supply chains. For example, as of 2019, the US accounted for only 12% of global semiconductor manufacturing, down from 37% in the mid-1990s. So that is a clear decline. It is very important to point out that the quality of education plays a very important part in why fewer and fewer US students choose to study engineering and computer science or choose to study science in general. Our public schools are actually failing to emphasize academic performance, academic achievement. If you have children and they go to a public school here in the United States, please leave me a comment with your experiences and what kind of improvements you would like to see based on your own experience, based on the experience of your children. So, as the result of the reasons that I just briefly mentioned, the US manufacturers are not competitive internationally because not only do we lack the infrastructure and effective policies that encourage growth, but also we lack academically prepared new generations of professionals who want to focus on the areas that make a difference when it comes to reviving a country's manufacturing capacity, as well as participating in research and development. That definitely helps with innovation. So this point brings us to our labor market. The United States has experienced a continued decline in manufacturing jobs for decades. The primary drivers are those two reasons that I just mentioned: outsourcing and big corporations having absolutely no incentives to invest in domestic infrastructure, as well as in research and development and R&D to facilitate innovation. As the result, the US manufacturing employment fell by nearly one-third in the last 2 decades. You may ask, where did those people go? Well, the answer is very simple, and it is not a good one. They actually moved to the service industry. The shift to the service industry is highly detrimental to workers because it actually hurts their economic security. Service jobs offer much lower pay. They offer much lower wages, as we know, since there is no collective bargaining power historically, and the number of those service jobs are very much driven by demand. So there is very limited security associated with those jobs, with those service jobs, on top of low pay. As an example, during the pandemic, those in the service industry were the first ones to lose their jobs and to suffer economically as they struggled to pay their rent, they struggled to pay their mortgages, their medical bills, for their food, and everything in between. It was difficult. It was extremely challenging for them. So here's a very important point to understand. When we talk about the disappearing middle class in the United States, by the way, there's an entire video on that I uploaded a couple of weeks ago. It is very important to understand that the loss of manufacturing jobs has been the main contributor to the widening income gap between the low earners and the high earners in the United States. The loss of these high-quality jobs in manufacturing was a major driver in the median income of working-class people falling by 20% between 1990 and 2013. So the US industrial policies for decades have largely ignored the need to invest in domestic workforce that could be highly skilled in, let's say, a high-tech manufacturing area such as semiconductors. A capitalistic worldview where corporations are left to seek higher and higher returns at the expense of millions of Americans who had to resort to moving to service industries and getting paid less. Lack of government incentives encouraged new businesses to enter the market and to do the same exact thing, to outsource jobs to countries where labor costs are low, and then to bring back those finished goods to the United States and sell those goods with a 50 or 100% markup to the same American consumers whom they hurt. That is the system that effectively led to the decline of manufacturing in the United States. While we enjoy lower prices on goods manufactured elsewhere, it helps, of course, and it helps facilitate trade, which is absolutely vital for emerging economies. We also have to understand that a country has to have sound industrial policies and to reinvest back into its own people to maintain competitiveness. Many other countries have policies that provide subsidies to new industries and help not only with innovation, with R&D, but also with implementing those new ideas. The United States failed to prioritize these important crucial steps, and now the United States Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen is busy trying to convince the entire world that China's industrial success is a bad thing. Well, of course it is a bad thing. It is a bad thing for the United States because the US has lost the race, not because of China's trade policies, but because of its own short-sighted approach, profit-seeking, sending billions of taxpayer funds overseas instead of helping average Americans, and its lack of desire to invest in its own people, as well as to invest in peace and prosperity in developing countries. Thanks for watching. I hope this video was interesting. I would like to ask you to show your support, give this video a thumbs up, consider sharing it, and subscribe both on Rumble and YouTube. You will find all of my social platforms linked in the video description below. I would love to have you for my next one tomorrow. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye for now.